Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive question. Why do companies like Apple, Amazon, Google, and Tesla just completely dominate the globe? And exactly how did the United States become one of the most powerful economies in human history? I mean, if you look around, it's honestly hard to ignore the staggering concentration of the world's richest companies and highest-paying industries located in just this one country. To really understand this absolute economic dominance, we have to start by asking the most obvious question that pops into your head. Is it just grit? Are Americans simply putting in more hours and working harder than everyone else? It's super tempting to just point to that classic American work ethic as the one single driving force. But the short answer? No. The real answer is much bigger and honestly a whole lot more fascinating. We're going to peel back the onion today and see that this wealth wasn't created overnight. It was built over generations through this incredibly intricate, interconnected web of history, relentless innovation, strategic investment, natural resources, and the unique position of the US dollar. So let's break down the actual anatomy of this economic superpower.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the foundation, scale, and geography.
You know, geography is often overlooked in economics. Actually, it's pretty much ignored most of the time, but it is absolutely critical here. The country is vast, featuring incredibly fertile farmland, massive rivers, and rich energy resources right under their feet. And crucially, being bordered by both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans acts almost like a giant moat. It makes international trade highly accessible, while historically protecting the nation from the major conflicts that devastated parts of Europe and Asia in the 20th century. Plus, internally, you have these immense transportation networks, highways, railways, and airports, connecting all these resources and creating one massive, highly efficient, interconnected economy. Because of that geographic and demographic scale, there are hundreds of millions of consumers sitting entirely within the domestic market. Think about what that actually means for a business. A company can create a product, generate massive revenue, and build a staggering nationwide success before it ever even needs to cross a single border. It builds a massive war chest right at home, and once it has that unshakable foundation, it takes the whole operation worldwide.
Which brings us to Section 2, the ecosystem, innovation, and culture.
America didn't just rely on its land, though. It bet incredibly big on creating an environment where wild, impossible ideas create enormous wealth. A huge piece of this puzzle is human capital. The U.S. boasts this vast network of world-class universities and research institutions that basically act as global magnets. They aren't just educating locals. They attract the brightest students, engineers, and scientists from every corner of the Earth. These places serve as deep incubators where raw ideas meet absolute top-tier talent. This creates a continuous chain reaction. It's beautiful, really. Education creates high-level talent. That talent drives technological innovation. That innovation spins out into new businesses, and those businesses generate incredible wealth. But the loop doesn't stop there. That wealth is then pumped right back into funding more research and more startups. Knowledge is quite literally transforming into a compounding economic asset. And this loop is fueled by a very unique entrepreneurial culture. In a lot of places around the world, a failed business is a permanent black mark. You're done. But in the US, people pitch crazy ideas and take massive risks, knowing that even if they totally strike out, they can extract the lessons from that failure and just build something new later. This cultural acceptance of risk means that, most startups might not become billion-dollar companies, but the few that do succeed spectacularly, they create a massive economic impact. Now, when you combine that relentless innovation with the modern scale of the internet, the math changes completely. Imagine you make $1 of profit per customer. With 100 customers, you have $100. Great. But technology allows software, streaming, and social media platforms to effortlessly reach 100 million customers or more without proportionally jacking up their costs. The digital age took America's domestic scale and just multiplied it globally, turning successful ideas into massive, historic fortunes. All right, moving on to Section 3, the financial engine, investment and the dollar. You see, creating a successful business is really only part of the equation. To truly wrap our heads around American wealth, we need to look at the massive financial systems that multiply money once it's created. The crucial point here is that wealth doesn't just come from earning a good salary. It comes from owning assets that grow in value. We're talking stocks, businesses, real estate. Millions of Americans participate in a highly sophisticated financial market. When investments are left to grow over long periods, they benefit from compound growth. Your investment earns a return, and then that return generates even more returns.
Over decades, this financial engine builds staggering wealth.
And what is adding rocket fuel to this financial engine? The US dollar itself. The dollar plays a completely central role in international finance. Countries, foreign banks, global corporations, and international investors, they all use the dollar for trade and for their reserves. This creates an enormous, nonstop global demand for the currency, deeply connecting American financial markets to the entire global economy. It gives the US unparalleled economic influence. However, hold on, we need to be really careful not to fall for a very dangerous misunderstanding here. Having the world's reserve currency doesn't mean America can just fire up the printers and create infinite amounts of money to become richer. That's not how it works. Printing excessive amounts actually causes severe inflation and serious economic instability. The true power of the dollar isn't in the printing press, it's in its deep integration and the deep trust it holds within the global financial system. Now, let's step back for Section 4, the reality check, the wealth divide. Analyzing this macro-level wealth machine definitely has a darker side that we absolutely have to acknowledge to get the full, honest picture. We must contrast the massive scale of the country's systemic economic power with the daily reality for millions of everyday citizens. Yes, the system contains enormous financial resources, but the cost of living is unbelievably high in many areas. Vital, everyday needs like housing, healthcare, and education are extremely expensive. Because of this, a significant portion of the population is left living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to cover basic expenses, while literally living right next door to some of the wealthiest entities on Earth.
And this brings us to a super vital distinction. The real story here is not that every single individual American is rich. That's a myth. The reality is that America built a machine, an economic system capable of creating enormous amounts of wealth. But ultimately, the output of that machine is distributed very, very unevenly. Let's wrap this up with our final takeaway, the lesson on value.
So, with all this vast, complex macroeconomics in mind, from geography to global finance, right down to wealth inequality, what should you actually take away from this to apply to your own life? The absolute biggest lesson is that enduring wealth is rarely created by one lucky decision or some sudden windfall. It is created by systems. Whether we're talking on a national level or just your personal bank account, wealth is built through continuous knowledge acquisition, a laser focus on owning assets, a drive for innovation, and most importantly, long-term thinking. It's about building a framework over years, even generations, that consistently turns raw ideas into tangible value. If you want to become financially successful yourself, you've kind of got to flip your mindset. You have to stop asking the basic question, how can I make more money right now? And start asking a much better, much deeper question. What valuable skill, idea, business, or asset can I build that will compound over time? Because here's the absolute truth at the end of the day. Income can only pay your bills. A salary just keeps the lights on. But true value creation, owning something that solves problems and actually grows, is what builds real wealth. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. As you navigate your own economic journey, are you just working to earn your next paycheck, or are you actively building a system of value that will generate returns long after you've stopped working?